Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Open Web Communities and Creators Hackathon. This session here is a session on Sputnik DAOs. So my name is Chloe Lewis. I am CreateBase co-facilitator. So CreateBase is a guild in the Near community. We kind of support the Mint-based ecosystem. And I am also on the Near community squad as a Near adoption specialist. So when you're trying to get onboarded to all this new and sometimes confusing Web3 tech, I will hopefully be there to support you along the way as well. But today, talking to us about Sputnik DAOs, we have some other people from the Near community who are here going to help us out. So I'll let them introduce themselves, and going down the line to start off, we have Jordan.
Hey there, thanks for having me and for running this. I'm Jordan, and I'm a technical project manager at Near, specifically working on Sputnik DAO implementation. And yeah, that's the main reason why this is so exciting to me. But a little bit of background, I actually wound up interested in Near because I run an art and tech nonprofit and collective that's been running for 10 years. And we're looking at what our next chapter looks like and what community owning itself looks like. And that was a huge attractor to me in the Sputnik ecosystem, is just that that's possible today. So I'll leave it at that and pass it on.
Awesome, thank you so much. Next, Max, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us who you are, what you've been working on.
Hey everybody, nice to meet all of you. I'm proud to be part of the community because to me personally, it's an opportunity to capitalize on the flexibility and overall opportunity of the Near tech to build the socially acceptable and socially usable platforms in the Web3. So this is my passion to make it happen. So we can all shift from Web2 to a Web3 layer completely. And I enjoy working in a community. It's pretty confusing sometimes, but a lot of fun. I'm leading a design team, building the reskin of the Sputnik DAO platform, and basically working with Jordan pretty closely. So at the moment, we're looking to integrate the V2 into the reskin, and I'm excited because of the flexibility and opportunities behind the version of the smart contract. So yeah, this is it pretty much.
Awesome, thank you so much. We'll be digging into a lot of that shortly. Dennis, if you wouldn't mind explaining to us who you are, why are you on this panel, what do you...
Yeah, hi, my name is Dennis. I'm a CEO of Stardust Taken, and apps developer. So I'm basically built the early version of Sputnik DAO V1. Let's say in a mock-up version before it gets to a reskin where it's a proper really interface and everything. So being like an early adopter of a new technology, I was very excited to kind of understand and learn what the smart contract can do. And it was really fun to hack in on V1, and I'm currently working on V2 right now. Basically, it has so much potential, and it's so much more than V1. So I basically can't even express it right now at the moment. So yeah, that's all. Yeah, for now.
Awesome, thank you so much, Ravi. If you would explain who you are, why you're here, what you've been working on with Sputnik, that'd be great.
So I do the client-facing work for Magic Powered, but I think Max and we've been in the space for about 3 years now, and there's I've had some healthy skepticism about DAOs in general and the ability for DAOs to function the way they were meant to. And while my skepticism around DAOs was particularly prominent for these large, expansive DAOs with thousands of people, I kind of found myself really attracted to the idea of the Sputnik DAO mesh, which has been the nomenclature that we've been using internally, to essentially like patch some of the issues that these large communal DAOs have, where we're on decision making around the ability of large groups of people to self-organize. So I'm very extremely excited about Sputnik DAO and how we can kind of add our UX expertise to help just facilitate these really interesting, essentially a paradigm shift. I think in a lot of ways this mesh DAO that Nir is working on, Sputnik DAO, is a step away from these larger like MakerDAO communities where everyone is involved in one DAO, and I'm excited to be part of that kind of evolution in essentially co-working, co-creation. So yeah, I'm happy to add to this panel in any way.
Awesome, thank you so much. And last but not least, Ilya, creator of Sputnik DAO, platform. There's a great question in the chat here as well, though, about like how does Sputnik DAO work? And so if you can kind of tell us who you are, what brought you here, but also a brief intro of like, what is it? What are we talking about here? And yeah, just how does it work?
Well, yeah, thanks, Chloe. Well, welcome everyone. Yeah, it's great to be here. Ilya, co-founder of Near Protocol, and I started Sputnik, but it's been carried by the folks here and a lot of other folks in the community as well since the original idea. And even the original idea actually came from like multiple conversations with folks around the community. So I would say it's kind of in general a very, very community-driven, as it should be, community toolkit. I would say like high level. There's actually like few things that I want to mention. One is like we're living in this world where we trying to promote more self-sovereignty and more control of individuals, but it's kind of with control of individuals you still need to organize, right? Like we are social people, we're social kind of species in a way, and so the way we organize, the way we communicate, the way we do work together, right? That's kind of where the next wave after like pure self-sovereignty, my money, my data, comes in. And so the DAOs, right, like why I was inspired by actually originally when I read about the DAOs from Vitalik's blog post was because it kind of surfaced this idea of like how we can come together, not in a rigid structure of a company, not in a specific, predefined whatever set of rules that whatever either some, government said or a company or like a bunch of lawyers wrote out, but actually in a way that the community itself wants, right? And so that was kind of the initial inspiration. And then as Ravi mentioned, right, there's been a lot of DAOs that kind of didn't really match this expectation, right? Like there's like this, idealistic vision that people have after reading the kind of some of this inspirational blog posts. And then you look at the reality and you're like, wait, that's not really that interesting. It's not really kind of matching what I want. And so, and at the same time in parallel, right, so Near has been launching and we've been trying to figure out, right, we need a governance system for Near. And kind of at Near, one of the core things that we approach in is really do not launch anything that's not very well tested. And any of the kind of decentralized governance systems that we've seen so far, none of them really function as far as I can tell. And so we've tried like a few different experiments and none of them really hits a mark. And so the idea was to start a very small experiment, which would be, let's give a little bit of kind of power and a little bit of organization to folks in the community, and let's see where they go with it, right? That was kind of the original idea, right? Actually, I was talking with Vadim back then, and he was like, hey, it would be really cool if we can just like really easily send a little bit of money for people who done some work. I'm like, yeah, indeed, that's a cool idea. How about we kind of organize around that? And so that was just like, original thing. I think the contract took like, a few hours to write. We kind of launched it. Denise, jumped in, built really quickly a front end. And that was the original thing. It was like, hey, can we give like a small amount of money for people who've done cool work? And then people started picking up and joining in and saying like, hey, actually, we can use it for different ways, right? We have, this community that is, doing this kind of stuff and we would love to pay them out. And then people start joining, asking for stuff. It's like, hey, we would love to organize it this way. And so And then kind of evolved into like this idea that actually like these DAOs can work together, right? They can ask from each other, they can do work for each other, they can be members of each other and things like that. So really it kind of started with like this small like experiment, and now it's like evolving with, you know, input from all these people into like almost a way of people organizing and interacting with each other. And actually we just were talking a few minutes before, and like the way I kind of frame it is like there's a lot of people who've been talking about how to build social networks, how to build kind of in crypto, right? And people just try to do one-to-one carbon copy, right? Like have a Twitter on blockchain, which like that's not really the crypto way. And DAOs and kind of something like what Sputnik DAO is becoming is more geared toward like how do you organize people together in a new way? And that's a way like the way you organize people is the way people come together, and also like money and work done and all those things is the new way to do social in crypto, at least like as an experiment. And so we'll see how this will evolve.
Thank you so much for that intro, Leah. And I think the point there on the end, like we'll see how this will evolve, definitely hits home. I know for me, Create-Base co-facilitator, Create-Base has been using Sputnik DAO for quite a while now, 2 to 4 months. We have over like 240 successful proposals that have gone through the DAO, and being able to see how, you know, we've been using the platform in our own way, but then other DAOs have now come on board and used it in their own way. So for bounties, or for proposals, or for now DAO-to-DAO interactions. And so now, you know, Sputnik DAO V1 has a pretty basic set of functions that you could use. And I know a lot of what this talk is about is Sputnik DAO V2. And now we've heard a bit about, you know, how Sputnik DAO got started. It started from an idea, the community's kind of taken that along, but now we're hopefully looking to V2 and kind of what the future of DAOs look like in the near ecosystem. But next, it'd be great to kind of hear again from Dennis about like, so what did that look like for you kind of coming on board? You know, you took up the job to make the first UI for the Sputnik DAO platform. What did that look like, and what are you hoping to do next with that UI?
Well, that was a while ago. Trying to remember, Leah approached and asked if I can make a very quick version of front end. And when I started working on it, I realized it's not as easy as I thought. So, well, trying to kind of make a low-level smart contract working for general public, for people who would probably need to understand, just to enter the data without thinking where the data goes, simplify it, like translate the user input into the contract language. That was basically the challenge, to add all the validations to make sure they don't enter incorrect data. Basically, the actual contract was easy to use in near CLI, where you can basically enter the required data and create proposals, approve proposals. Ilya did a really great job to specify all the commands which you need to run. So anyone really could basically jump in, look at the examples and create proposal using near CLI tool without any front end. But most of the people are not familiar with CLI or command lines or anything, so they like to have it in presented in on the browser window, easy to use. So that took some time to implement, but then in the end, I think we covered most of the use cases. So that's basically how we get there. And I think any issues we had with the old version of UI, the mockup, we have addressed, and most of them at least, and it's been operational. So
yeah, it's been working out really well for the community. So thank you very much for that. Moving on now, it would be kind of great to hear, Max, You kind of been working with Magic Power to work on this new reskin. Jordan as well, feel free to kind of hop in. You've been working from the near side on this, and Ravi as well, feel free to jump in. But it would be great to hear about your experience, building a front end for a near application. Also, as a group of developers, what's that been like? And also, moving on from just the version 1 implementation of the UI, what are your goals or ideas for what V2 can offer us beyond just the basic functionality of V1?
Yeah, thank you. So initially, since we got in later in the process when Dennis has already built his UI and the V1 was already addressed almost at full scale. So I approached this task as more like unwrapping and building the development infrastructure, preparing it for the V2 integration, because it didn't make a lot of sense to basically do the same thing but more fancy. But while we were doing that, we figured out a lot of fundamental things that are required for the future robust and fast iterations going further. Like we have our environments, we've been through the workflow process with Jordan. It feels very polished to the extent when it's getting boring already at some times, because we getting sometimes so efficient in calls that we just spend like a couple minutes and we're done. We have pretty consistent design repos, and spending most of the time refactoring some basic things, waiting for a V2 to launch, trying to address work with some of the feedback from the community to migrate it for the future V2 as well. And yeah, for the last maybe months or a couple of months, we closed maybe close to 400 tasks coming from Jordan, coming from the community, iterating it piece by piece, adding some tiny blows and whistles to this UI. And at some point, we found that we better wait again for people who has more experience integrating with the smart contract to say what they think. And then the moment we will feel that we're confident in the velocity and efficiency of the integration processes going further with doing this for the V2, we will kick off. And I think that this reskin UI overall can emerge pretty beautifully in the set of features and cover most of the user needs. So I hope people will be feeling this is their place to operate, not only for their business operations needs, for their community needs, but more if you will, a town square where you can discover, where you can meet, where you can work, where you can just hang out and talk a little bit and be creative. Overall, this Fab3 covers very close use case for me where undiscovered people can hop in, get funds for something cool, get discovered, and then proceed further, working on what they like.
Yeah, so it seems like here, part of the idea is to ensure that creators, as they come to this platform, are not just using Sputnik DAOs for the basic transfer of funds and having that's kind of the first iteration, but moving forward, the Sputnik DAO V2 platform is going to be kind of this hub where you can, do a lot more, kind of govern your entire community from this one hub. And I know that part of that is not just ensuring that the governance aspects of Sputnik DAO is catered to, but also other functions, like being able to purchase art or NFTs with your DAO, being able to either stake or move funds with your DAO might be important for managing a community. Being able to govern your social token, how much of the token is minted, who it's given to, might also be important. That's all important for Sputnik V2 and governing communities, but also putting it all into a UI must be very complicated. You kind of alluded to it, Max. When you're building, a UI or application for a community, where every single community might be wanting to use it in a different way, that can definitely cause some tension or issues with development speed or development cycle. So Jordan, it would kind of be great to kind of hear from you potentially about what does it look like, getting an application or front end built for a factory contract where the entire community might be wanting to use it in different ways. Again, it's so much to be done there. But
yeah. And yeah, there's a lot going into it. And before I dive in too much, I want to make the distinction between kind of two tracks of work that are happening. There's the contract side of things, where there's the original V1 Sputnik contract, and then there's the V2 contract, which has a lot more functionality, and that's what is allowing for the social tokens to be used, for tiers of different kinds of governance to happen, and things like that. So it's a lot more flexible, and also allows for the arbitrary function calls, so DAOs can do anything that a user could do on chain. So there's that track of work that's happening, kind of the smart contract track. And then there's also the UI track, and that's when we're talking about reskin. That's where the UI is happening. Dennis has been doing more of the getting it functional and making sure that it even works from a UI perspective, and it's a step up from the command line so that people can actually interact with the thing. And then after that, interacting or looking to the users and finding out what's important to them, doing user testing, going through forum posts, getting everybody's feedback. The hackathon that's happening right now has been amazing for gathering feedback from people. Every week we're getting feedback, and Magic Power has been just awesome at being responsive to that and making changes and iterating. So that's a lot of it, and I urge everybody to check it out, check out the interface, and at least submit a proposal to a DAO. If you aren't ready to make your own DAO yet, or you're not sure what you'd make a DAO for, there's close to 100 DAOs on Near right now. So there's a lot of interests being covered. So give it a try and let us know what you think, either on the forum or on Telegram. It's always great hearing what rough edges people run into. Some of the most significant changes from a user experience perspective that happened with the reskin was giving people the framing of what it even was that they were beginning to interact with. So we created a landing page that explains the application, gives some context, helps people get oriented before diving into the interface where they actually make proposals, vote on proposals, etc. And then a second really big improvement that happened was the ability to search. It sounds like a novel thing, maybe trivial, but search is actually hard when you get under the hood of it, and when it works well, you don't think anything of it. So it's great to have search to be able to quickly find the proposals that are relevant to you, the DAOs that are relevant to you, and to quickly move between them. So those were kind of like, from a user experience perspective, two of the big wins of the reskin was allowing people to have context, and then also allowing them to navigate more quickly. And then obviously there's other bells and whistles, but that was the main stuff that I was really excited to ship. And then as we're moving into implementing the V2 features, the contract V2 features, there's a lot of ground to cover, and that means that there's a lot to think through. One of the gnarliest examples there is with arbitrary function calls. How do those get represented in an interface? Is it something like an app store? Is it something that requires something like if this then that? So that's what we're working through currently, is doing user testing around those things. And if you're interested in providing feedback and being an early user, just get in touch through any of the channels. The community is quite open, so we love hearing from folks. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, James. And I mean, getting into arbitrary function calls and the idea that, I mean, any function call that you could make with your personal Near account, you can now in Sputnik DAO V2 make with your DAO. It's kind of all it really means. And so the idea there is, you know, you can kind of think of the most, the craziest, wildest ideas of what the ways in which you can experiment with Near personally, and now you can experiment in that way with your community. And that, to me, is kind of one of the coolest parts of what we're doing here. Is we're kind of thinking like, how can we achieve consensus within our community in an efficient way, and then have a transaction happen on chain securely, transparently for the community. And so, you know, for me, and we've been talking about like art, you know, being able to purchase NFTs as a DAO and staking. So I kind of like to bring it back to Ilya and say, you know, are there kind of low-hanging fruit areas or areas that you kind of like to see communities using Sputnik DAOs in the near future? You know, from Crate-Base kind of asking, you know, selfishly, maybe for some of the other DAOs as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think there are a few use cases that like people are kind of pretty much earning to start doing for V2 that are really interesting. One of them is there's been, so pretty much like in V1, you can only kind of, people would come and say like, hey, I want to do something, give me funds, and there's no kind of accountability integrated in the process. Or what it was designed for, more like people would come and say, I already done something, please pay me. There's no way for the DAO itself to say, hey, this work needs to be done. So there's no way kind of to advertise the work that DAO wants to be done. And so I know you, Chloe, like for Crate-Base, you've just been doing that separately on the forum and in other places. But kind of now there's a way to actually do it directly in the DAO. It's called bounties. You can pretty much link it, kind of describe what you want. You can say how many times it can be done. And then there's a process of accountability where you review people's kind of submission and decide to pay them or not. And so that kind of comes in. And so like even for Near, we actually have a bunch of bounties right now linked on GitHub. And then we need to manually, like somebody manually needs to process them, review and then pay, and then ask person on GitHub to link their Near account and stuff like this. So all of that can actually transition, and everybody else's like guilds that are doing this work can transition on chain and kind of in one place. So I think that's really, really kind of good way to kind of introduce a bunch of folks to kind of start like, hey, I want to do some work, especially with like new UI where we can like have a special view with a bunch of bounties kind of collected from all the DAOs. People can come in and start doing the interesting work in the community. The other thing that a lot of folks are excited is actually investment. So there are quite a few, I mean, obviously right now kind of market is, well, here and there, but in general, people are excited in investing in projects, in communities, in creators, right? Like people want to maybe fund them one way or another, and then maybe receive part of the royalties from their art that they created, for example. And so all that can be done through a Sputnik DAO, and you can pretty much like facilitate that in various ways. One of the really cool thing is actually pairing the Sputnik with something like with a streaming payment service. So streaming payment is when instead of receiving paycheck once a month or whatever, get a grant like whenever you apply, you can just say like, hey, receive that amount of money, like starts now, right? And then so people kind of receive income pretty much, and then they can withdraw it whenever they want, but like it accumulates there per period of time. And then you, for example, while they receive this income, they can be assigning like part of the royalties of the NFTs they mint or the other work they do, you know, maybe they're writing code or, you know, creating content for Medium or whatever that is, right? So you're kind of actually getting a real company now, right? Where you have people on payroll, which they're receiving kind of continuously. And then, you know, you can allocate back and forth depending on the work they're doing and stuff like this. So I think that's a really kind of interesting evolution that's coming there.
Thank you so much for that, Ilya. Those are some great examples. We do have a question for you though as well. I will link it in the chat so that everyone can see it if they don't have access to the questions area. But the question is, question to Ilya, can you please give an example of tokenized user or business data NFTs and their interactions with external processes and smart contracts. I think you gave a lot of examples of pretty much how that would work just now, but maybe one specifically for NFTs.
Yeah, I think somebody just read my tweet. That's what it sounds like. Yeah, I think the example I had in mind was specifically for business data, right? So there's a thing it's called trade finance, where as a business you produce some product and then you invoice the receiver of this product, and then they pay you, let's say, a month later or 2 months later. I mean, outside of the fact that like the complexity of this process, but this invoice itself actually can be an NFT. Right, so you have an NFT that represents some future payout that is, can be then integrated into other things. Right, you can put it into lending, you can, use it as collateral, or you can just sell it on a secondary market. So, like the process of kind of like this payouts and things like that, if as kind of I mentioned, like the data belongs to the user or to the business in this case, to the actor, they can pretty much make this kind of tokenized pieces of the process and then kind of integrate it into all the other applications that already exist on chain. And so like that's kind of the power of protocols, right? That's what we're really receiving with saying that like everything is powered by protocols and everything is composable, because kind of everybody knows how the other applications talk about.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. And Rich Tobacco explaining about doing the same with tokenizing CDP. And in my opinion, similar to, I would ask, tokenizing insurance, where you can kind of take the NFT of the insurance, trade it around, and then whoever's holding the NFT, whoever's holding the insurance NFT is able to then cash in on that insurance. So these ideas of kind of exactly having a protocol in which you can trade something on an open, decentralized market gives it that kind of power, where you lose a little bit of the capital inefficiency, and you're able to provide a little more. People can extract capital from a lot more of their assets. So moving forward now, I know we've been getting a few questions. We're a little over halfway through this panel talking about Sputnik DAOs. I know we have some hackers in the chat here. If you have any questions about maybe ways in which you'd like to use Sputnik DAOs for your specific community, please ask them here. The idea, call to action right now is you can go on the Sputnik.fund website, the UI there, and you can create your own Sputnik DAO and kind of get started interacting with the platform on mainnet. You could use the Sputnik DAO platform for adding new council members, for removing council members, for sending payout proposals. So Ilya was kind of talking about what CreateBase does currently. So CreateBase does reward its community through Sputnik DAO proposals. So for example, Mintbase just launched this past week, and it costs 7 NEAR, for example, to set up a store, because NEAR has storage staking. And so to launch your own smart contract on the NEAR blockchain, you need to have 7 NEAR deposited for storage. So we use our Sputnik DAO, and we have people submit on the NEAR governance forum, their Twitter handle and all the proof needed to submit the payout on the Sputnik DAO. And then users in our community are actually the ones who are coming to our DAO on chain and submitting a request for, it's actually 8 NEAR. We give 1 extra NEAR for people being able to mint and interact with the blockchain. But the idea is users are able to come to NEAR after doing a task, or to do a task, and earn back 8 NEAR. So we're talking about V2 here is the idea that CreateBase could actually have a bounty available and say that these funds are allocated for this service. We're going to set up a bounty, and people who complete this task can then earn. And that's kind of one of the cool ideas we can do from V2, and one of these cases that CreateBase specifically could use it right now. And so if you get started with Sputnik V1, I think that's a great way to kind of see where what type of extra features might your community specifically in order for DAOs to be a viable use case. I know, Ravi, you were talking about how you had some skepticism about DAOs in the past. You see these huge DAOs where, for me, it was having DAOs where people can't afford to vote. So for example, on Ethereum, people got the Uniswap airdrop, and in my opinion, it becomes pretty difficult to see how a community would vote on a certain topic if people can't afford to use the network and vote on the chain. So one of the cool ideas, in my opinion, is potentially using the Rainbow Bridge for some of these ideas and taking larger communities from Ethereum, moving the voting to their side chains, layer 2 platforms, or near, for example, and then because you can have arbitrary function calls, maybe keeping the assets on Ethereum or other chains where those assets are. So there you go, Ilya, saying Flux Protocol has a DAO for providing data feed on chain. That's pretty cool. Speaking about Rich's Oracle DAOs. So I think it'll be cool actually hear a little more talk about this. So Ilya, I want to have you kind of come up again, if you don't mind, and kind of speak a bit more about Rich's kind of question and about what's possible right now with Flux.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, probably the Flux team would be way better. But yeah, I mean, kind of Flux is a kind of a generic data provider like Oracle system that started on Near, and there's various ways how it works, but kind of one of the almost like a simplest conflict resolution systems is just a DAO, right? Is if you're reading data and it doesn't match, for example, from your sources, there's few ways how you can resolve it. One is medianize, for example. That's what, for example, Maker is doing. One is stall, how some other decisions making. You can also kick in the prediction market kind of process, and that's part of what Flux is offering in their toolkit. But you can also have a DAO where some selected kind of trusted members can pretty much resolve conflicts and decide. And it also allows to do provision of data that might not be possible to do through kind of more automated ways. So I mean, again, it's more I'll let their team to explain in more detail when they're ready. I think it's coming pretty soon in more detail, but you can also check out fluxprotocol.org. But in general, the DAO kind of infrastructure, right, allows you to come together and kind of make decisions or provide information that is better with more folks coming in versus something that might require something that one person or one entity could only provide.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Ilya. And I'm just going to read out Rich's question for those that may be watching this back later. So the question was, do you like the idea of Oracle DAOs specializing in different data feeds, attaching real-world reputation to accuracy of data, all using a standard framework for feeding data into smart contracts? And then Ilya just answered that. So kind of moving on from that kind of specifically into a more broad sense of how we start making DAOs. How do we start making DAOs more fun, more usable for the average person? Ravi, I know that you are planning on using NFTs to signify each DAO. You have some cool ideas of spinning up generative art pieces to kind of have visual representations for each DAO. I think it's a pretty cool idea in general. To kind of, if these kind of groups are going to be spun up for community, they can't just be for security. They can't just be for transparency. They also need to be something that are fun, that we're being a part of just to enjoy ourselves as well. So if you'd like to speak to any part of that, your ideas there, that would be great.
So that was actually when we first engaged with Near on this, on the kind of reskin. The idea was to, well, actually, it happened quite by chance. We kind of proposed a set of options for the new logo for Sputnik DAO, and what we ended up finding was that we had the design assets to essentially spin out more than 200,000 kind of combinations of these Sputnik DAO logos using just a simple script. So what we ended up having was this massive pool of logos, and the initial idea was to, or at least we talked about this a little bit with Nima and with Jordan, was about and James Wan actually. He was quite. He really liked this idea and kind of poked on it a bunch of times, was that we could create essentially auto-minted NFT. And I think, Chloe, this is where I kind of pulled you into this discussion as part of the process of opening a new DAO. So, I would go in, I open a new DAO. Part of my user flow would be an auto-minted NFT. that would pop up. The idea was to potentially group these logos by purposes so that it could be easy to identify the kind of group, the main purpose of a DAO, simply by looking at their logo. And in the long term, kind of taking these NFT logos and allowing people in the DAO to participate in certain airdrops, certain meets, certain I don't know. The possibilities were endless. When we talked about it, what it did do was, when we kind of looked into implementing it, is it kind of brought to light one of the things that Max and I talk about often in the Web3 space, which is lack of best practices. And this is like within a community that is already quite interactive and is kind of talking to each other constantly. But one of the kind of issues that we faced, other than the short timeline to deploy, was to standardize the process of auto-minting these NFTs, and then being able to streamline the process of actually drawing them from these individual NFT minting platforms to the Sputnik DAO. And then how would you do that retroactively for DAOs that have already started? So I think this would be an interesting, if the community likes the idea, I think this could be an interesting thing to explore as we iterate on the Sputnik DAO interface a little more. I just think it would be very interesting to see possibilities of how we almost self-organize the community around these auto-generated NFT logos.
Yeah, thank you so much for more information there for the community. I think it's a wonderful idea, just in general, of like potentially having every successful proposal that goes through a DAO generate the logo for that community to that user. So it's a pretty cool way of being like, oh, cool, I am a Crate-based community member. I did a task or a bounty from the Crate-based DAO. I earned, let's say, 5 near or 10 near, or even let's say I earned 50 Crate-based tokens, right? That's awesome. But also, if I was able to get a Crate-based generated logo, I could have, let's say I'm using Mint-based for that. I could have my split revenues for that going back to the DAO, so that if in the future I end up selling my generated NFT, I'm actually going to be earning funds back for the Crate-based DAO. Also, like say in V2, we could have some sort of voting mechanism where you have to have at least one membership NFT to propose, on our DAO. So that could be one of the, very low hanging fruit is, come to one of our events, get a membership, come do something else, get a membership. But that can create a little bit of a secondary market for the tokens, which can then again, create some extra incentives for the economy. So I think it'd be cool to hear from you, Dennis, next about the future plans for you and the ways in which you'd like to maybe. Do you have plans for developing a new UI for Sputnik DAO? Do you have plans maybe using it for staking in your? I know you kind of work on staking platform UIs as well. Do you have ideas for using Sputnik DAO in your own community?
Yeah, actually, I'm involved in making the V2 mock-up pods in a way to understand how to present it better, so the magic power can actually make it look really beautiful, etc. So for now, it looks very, very interesting, and the possibilities are limitless. So I have a couple of ideas how to actually make it working for long term. So thanks, Jonathan, mentioning App Store for the V2. It's going to work some way, a modular way. So let's say we have a specific task. Someone wants to create a new token and use for community. So this will be developed as a module and presented in UI. So let's say someone else decided he needs to make arbitrary call to another type of contracts like NFT contracts, and it's not in UI yet. So the bounty will be presented on UI. Say, who wants to make this module? And because it's going to be in modular way, anybody can basically clone the repo, add this little module, which is going to be a separate file, let's say, easy to add. And basically, after this is approved, it appears on the UI. So having limitless possibilities is something which is impossible to actually develop. So, but over time, what community wants can be added as a second module, another module, etc. App Store is a good word for it, I say. So if somebody wants a new app, a module, then they request for it, or someone have an idea how to connect the Ethereum through the Rainbow bridge through the module, and they will basically present it as a proposal and develop. So this way, the magic power will not be overwhelmed with a lot of new, UI modules to be developed. And I'm seen as a continuous process. Like, when the contract is updated, because the V2 smart contracts are upgradable, it can have a new feature like in a couple of months, and the UI needs to be basically presenting that new feature. So if we're talking about modules, it's basically easy to do. And with the token contracts already available on the mainnet, there are so many possibilities. One example is we are a staking provider on proof of stake protocols, on Near mainly, then Solana, etc. So we want to have our users, we want to benefit our users from our staking activities. It can be done through the DAO utilizing, let's say, Stardust token. So we can mint the token and then distribute it a certain way to our users, so they can have not only staking rewards, but something else. So this is all possible with the Sputnik DAO. But as I said, there's so many different, so many possibilities. It just, the UI will look really good, when it's done.
Yeah, thank you so much. You touched on some points there, and I think kind of it gets me excited every time there's new ideas of groups in Near who are like, yes, I want to use Sputnik DAO for this idea or that idea, because it really just shows that we need as many iterations of this as possible, and we're all experimenting together on the ways in which we can kind of come to consensus within our communities in useful ways. There is a question as well here, so I will read it out. I think it starts with a question to Ilya. Please give an example of tokenized user or, sorry, that question already. I remember listening to a podcast interview Ilya did a while ago, and he talked about how the Near account model allows for any individual account to transform into a business account. The example he used was with the royalty token standard. I'm assuming it connects to the next part of the question. So can you create an account with a bunch of royalties attached to it and then sell that account to profit off of the attached NFTs? How does this account model map onto the DAO structure, especially with regard to the business or company model? So in my opinion, this would just look like setting royalties to go back to a DAO and then changing the council of that DAO so that other people can earn from it. But Ilya, if you have like specifics to how it would work in a business case, feel free to add.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, pretty much. So Near accounts kind of the way they work, right? They can fluidly go from being a regular account for a person to becoming contract, to going back to a person, to be traded as an asset, to go back to being a contract. And so what it means is, like, let's say I create an account, I'm a creator, I don't know anything about any of the DAOs, like I don't care at this point. I just want to sell my art. I'll go into Minbase, I go to Paras, I create my art, I start selling it, there's royalties attached to it, they go back to my account. Then later, I'm discovering kind of through the community how to do this. And so you can actually upgrade your account, right, by deploying DAO on top of this account to become a DAO. And so where it was, like let's say my account is ilya.near, it was my personal account, you can actually turn that ilya.near into a DAO. And then all the things that attach to it, right? All the royalties, rewards, whatever else is like streaming payments, whatever else now go to the DAO and are governed by the DAO. And so there you can, kind of manage it by yourself. You can start adding new people. You can create structures around, maybe some people can, create NFTs under your name. So like ilya.near now a brand, and, more people, more creators now join together to like create under that brand and stuff like this. And then you can go and actually decide to sell this account. And so how the way selling works is actually selling replaces a contract on that account to a specific sell contract, which is just an escrow. And so then whoever puts sends enough near to that account gets access to that account, like it removes the contract and then sends kind of the money to the person who put it for sale. So for example, let's say this was a DAO, this DAO decided to sell this business, right? They want to kind of exit, right? So one way to exit is they can just, put this for sale and then distribute the rewards, equally or non-equally or whatever. Or they can say, oh, with all these rewards, buy, like we issued a token before, they're token holders, let's buy back that token and, burn it or whatever. So whatever the value capture it creates there. So, and then whoever buys it, they can also be a DAO. They can turn this account into a DAO or whatever options, right? So it's kind of the myriad of options you can create around this is almost like unlimited, because like each of these things is an actor on its own, and they can all become a DAO. They can all become an asset. So it's kind of this like trinity of actor, contract, and asset that you can interact with.
Thank you very much for that explanation. That definitely set some rabbit holes going in my mind, thinking about how we could use this. There was another question going off that as well. And the question is, would that change your account name to something like ilya.dao.near? I'm assuming not. Or will it still be ilya.near and you're just creating the contract on your account?
Yeah, it's just a contract on that account. So the name is your identifier. Like think of it as, email maybe is a bad example, but like, you registered like somewhere, this is the identifier and this is how everybody knows like this identifier. So all the royalties, all the assets, everything is attached to this identifier.
Awesome. That is super cool. Because the Marma J Foundation on Mintbase has already started minting some entities on testnet, and the idea is to set royalties back to the Marma J DAO. But this is a pretty cool and interesting way of kind of keeping everything under the same brand as well, and keeping all royalties going back to, let's say, marmaj.near, and then just deploying a DAO underneath that and having a plan, let's say, to decentralize your community over time. So this could be a way of saying, you know what, our community is going to stay under one name right now, so say community.near, and over time you could have plans to decentralize that address by adding a DAO to it, having a token that helps you with the governance rights and everything like that. So that's pretty cool. If anyone has any more questions, we are heading up to the end of the hour here for this panel. So please do ask them now. You can ask them out in the chat, or you can kind of type them out in the questions bar. Thank you so much to everyone for the questions you've already asked, the comments as well. They've made this panel more exciting and helpful for those that are watching and participating. And also, if anyone on the panel has kind of some last points they'd love to get out, please definitely feel free to put those out there. People are here kind of listening to the experts here. You guys are kind of the experts on Sputnik DAOs. You guys have been building the UIs, working on the contracts, and kind of organizing the community feedback as well. As if no one has any points yet, I'd love to have Jordan come up again and give some last points about, maybe how have you seen people using the DAO so far? What are the stats look like? I know we shared a stats link. I'll share it again. What are the stats looking like? And maybe what are some of your goals for some of those stats? If we're hoping to have every single community coming to near and spinning up DAOs and spinning them back down, what should we see this look like? In the next
Yeah. Thanks for having me up again. And kind of one closing thought on my part is we are just getting started with all of this DAO stuff. We say we've got a close to 100 DAOs on chain right now. That's almost nothing compared to where things could go. And Near is so well positioned to welcome in the next billion users to the crypto space. That's one of the things that has me really excited. And as we're doing the interface design, well, we have current crypto users in mind. We're really thinking of Web 2 users and how we can make this accessible to somebody who is coming from using Venmo or similar things, maybe an off-chain voting mechanism, something like that. So we're all pioneers here. You're going to run into some rough edges as you're exploring, but now is a great time to be getting involved and to steer the direction of what this all means. Near is also super excited about all of the bridging that's happening. So one of the things that I love about Near is how friendly of a chain it is. The fact that we have Rainbow Bridge working today means that when I'm talking to folks who are looking at spinning up DAOs in the summer of DAOs that's happening, Sputnik is a way of doing it today that allows them to bridge their assets from the Ethereum network where they're already invested and actually do voting on chain with them. So that stuff is really exciting and opening up possibilities for a lot of people. Currently we have like just over $1 million total US dollars paid out through Sputnik and also value locked in Sputnik. So I think that that's a number that, like, if you're conservative, you could say that's going to be doubled in 6 months. I think that it could easily be 10x that as people discover DAOs. I think goal-wise, that's totally feasible. Considering that the hackathon that's going on, we have had over 50 project proposals, and of those, that would be a 50% increase on the number of DAOs on chain if each one of those actually creates a DAO. And we're all Daoists here. Yes, we are. I also love Qigong and teaching that stuff. But and if we look at that, like the numbers from just a hackathon, a 3-week hackathon, that number of DAOs spinning up, and that just being the start, the momentum is tremendous. So goal-wise, I think that if we see 200 DAOs in the next 6 months, like that's an easy target.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jordan. And I know that numbers don't always tell the specific story that we're trying to, portray, but I do think it's a really cool and interesting way to kind of quickly glance and see that, real people are using these products. You can kind of start seeing, how much funds are going through some of these products in this platform. And I think that kind of goes to show that it's not just us here alone trying to, push this tech onto our communities. When we go to create baseline, it's easy to onboard people, but the idea is, one user at a time, one proposal at a time, one DAO at a time. We're trying to really iterate and experiment and see, how these DAOs can be useful in the future. And it's been so much fun to do this so far on Near, and I hope that you join us, especially over the next, few days and last week of this hackathon, but moving forward as well. So if you'd like to get, involved with Sputnik DAO development, creating your own Sputnik DAO, or any other kind of ideas DAO related on Near, please get in touch with myself, Chloe Lewis, or anyone else on this panel. We got Jordan, Max from MP, Dennis, Ravi, and Ilya. Get in touch with any of us. We'd love to kind of get you into the right place to kind of get you further along your path with DAOs on Near. So thank you so much, everyone. We're going to be ending the panel off here and hope to see you on the Near governance forums soon with your idea to set up your own DAO. Okay. Bye, everyone. Talk soon.
Thank you.